You are on the brink. You are on the brink. You are on the brink.
Warning. Warning. Proceed at your own risk. We are now entering the underground. The algorithm has no power here. Your eyes and ears are vulnerable. Prolonged exposure may cause psychological damage. If you experience symptoms, return to the surface at once. Welcome to the Brink Film Club.
Welcome to Brink Film Club. I'm your host, David Pike, and with me is my co-host, Veronica Chase.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
And today we have Jazzy Benson with us, filmmaker, also somebody who does a lot of events on the side, from cyberfuck to multitudes of many things. Always staying busy, always part of the community, helping out films in any way and every way possible. How you doing, Jazzy?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for making this happen for us to be able to chat about movies.
I'm excited to have you show. You directed a film called Earthbound USA that is now streaming?
Yeah, that's available like on Apple TV Plus, as well as I think Amazon Prime, kind of those general streaming platforms. It's also available on earthboundusa.com. But yeah, that came out in 2023. It was a feature-length documentary about a kind of a cult following around a video game that came out in the 90s called Earthbound that didn't do very well, kind of bombed in the States when it came out. And then it kind of hit the bargain bins and became this cult phenomenon online. So the documentary kind of chronicles the rise of the fan base in the States and them kind of trying to get Nintendo of America to release more of these games outside of Japan. And kind of growing up along the way and kind of having to confront some of the interesting realities of being an adult in America and dealing with business.
What made you want to do a documentary about Earthbound USA?
Yeah, I mean, I was just really good friends with a lot of the people who were involved in that community throughout the early 2000s. I actually started a YouTube series that was a video series called Earthbound Saga that was inspired by the video game Earthbound. It was kind of like my brother and myself reenacting the game in live action, and we kind of uploaded that right when YouTube hit in 2005. So kind of pre-Google purchase. And there weren't a lot of videos on YouTube at that time, and there was even fewer Earthbound videos. And so it seemed to get some traction, and I ended up just becoming friends with a lot of the people on the internet at that time who were fans of the game. And from there, I kind of got connected with the fan site that the documentary eventually would be about. I was just fascinated with a lot of the kind of folklore and the inside stories about them making all these petitions and trying to get them to like the president of Nintendo of America. And it's just very, very sweet kind of story that I wanted to dig into and kind of treat as a coming of age story, because that's kind of how I saw it. A little bit like Stand By Me, but for millennials, I guess.
Yeah. Did anything come about it? Did it obviously did more and more people get to know what Earthbound was when it got released? Has it got a little bit more traction since the movie came out?
You know, Earthbound has kind of reached its peak in some ways. I think a lot of people know about it these days from various other things like the video game Undertale, which was inspired by Earthbound in many ways. So I think Earthbound's kind of had its moment of a lot of people being aware of it. The documentary, in some ways, I think it kind of more contextualizes the fan base's story in a larger cultural context, moving through the decades of kind of telling the story of the early internet going into the post-social media era. So, yeah, in some ways, I don't know if it really brought attention to Earthbound as much as maybe just kind of recontextualized some of it, and it was kind of more of an inquiry into the folklore and what larger forces it was tied to.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So what are you working on right now?
Yeah, right now I'm working on my next feature film project, which has been something I've been developing for a couple of years, but just recently been much more seriously pursuing it, kind of from a more experimental production standpoint, and finding out ways to kind of do it with a lot of the community support that's in Tucson around independent film, and try to film it over the course of a long duration, so that way we can kind of space out the production needs. And so I'm in the process of adapting this story for something that can kind of take place over like 18 months. So it's kind of interesting.
Wow. So I know we brought up this in the past, but comparing Tucson's film community to others, how do you see the film community here compared to maybe other film communities around the country?
Yeah, I mean, my point of reference for film communities is mostly based in Tucson, because I've lived here since 2011, and I really got involved with the film community out here really starting in like 2017. I've kind of seen it grow more and more since then. And what's interesting about it is because it's a college town, you have a lot of people who are kind of coming through and here for, 4 years at a time. And they usually end up moving off to Los Angeles or New York or some other place where there's a bit more consistent work. But there are folks who do stick around. And the people who I find that stick around are generally really passionate and like want to make films that you couldn't really make elsewhere. And so I think in that way, Tucson's a very interesting film community. You have people who can actually afford the time or have the capacity to make something that's very personal. And that's what I find really inspiring, is kind of the weird personal stuff that can kind of come out of a place like Tucson, where at least as the time of recording this, people can still afford to live here. But we'll see how that goes in the next couple of years.
Well, let's move on to the movies. First, we're going to talk about your film, Jazzy, Fresh Kill.
They call it a landfill. Fresh Kill, the world's biggest dump.
Rainbow coup d'etat.
When are you gonna let the cat out of the bag? I'm working on it.
Metafiction.
The Belgian dogs have been here. The English dogs, the Spanish dogs, all the rabid dogs have been here.
It's definitely a virus.
Little rubber what? Nubs. For extra pleasure.
You're special.
You need to incorporate some indigenous rhythms with your rap.
Fresh Kill is it's a movie that I actually found out about just through like a deep online search for movies within kind of the cyber cinema genre. It was something that had never come across my radar until several years ago. And then when I started looking into it, I realized like how unique it was, in that it was this film, made in the late 80s, early 90s by a artist named Shuli Chang in New York. And, she was part of a community of artists out there. And this film was like an independent venture that was all shot in 35 millimeter, like independently financed. It's a very like bold thing to do even at that time. But the fact that they were kind of shooting so big with this maximalist story, I think just from a production standpoint, it's really fascinating. But the film itself, the story, tells this very kind of sweet narrative about this lesbian couple living in New York and kind of trying to navigate kind of the changing world and dealing with, corporate greed, dealing with contaminated food and like houselessness and growing like waste dumps and so forth, and kind of just the consequences of the waste that is generated from Staten Island and how that is kind of exported overseas to different countries as pollution, and then how that kind of infects the fish in the ocean over there, and then that's shipped back over here and served in high-class sushi restaurants. That's a very interesting movie in what it kind of gets into.
It's almost like when I watched it, it's almost like some scenes were somewhat dreamlike, like that restaurants and like a lot of things. You're almost like, is this a dream? Is this the way it's shot? And then the sky was yeah. And you're like, wow, I'm kind of like, this is kind of trippy. I'm enjoying this quite a bit. But it really brought back a lot of those like early 90s sort of like films because the style, even the font on like the poster is like extremely 90s. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, a lot of things about this just made me feel like I was just kind of back in the 90s in a way. And I was like, I like I said, I enjoyed it quite a bit, but yeah, it was almost dreamlike in some seats.
Very liquid television-esque.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like that's one of the really great parts about it. It's like all of the best parts of weird 90s like cinema done in this kind of avant-garde way. Like one thing I really love about the film is maybe one of those most dreamy like aspects of it is the tempo and just the weird like syncopation of everything, and how the whole thing feels like a beatnik poem just kind of being thrown around, and it doesn't really ever stop to explain itself to you. Yeah, there's something really I just love that kind of stuff. It's like,
yeah, and then the kid gets kidnapped, and then it turns into this like, gotta find the kid, and it's like, it's just, I mean, it twists and turns, but it's always keeping you entertained, you know. And it's pretty good. But I do have to note that it's just celebrated its 30th anniversary, doing some screenings. And you hosted one in town, right? With the Filmmaker.
Yeah, we did. Shuli actually was touring around the United States with a new remastered 35 millimeter print of the film. And she was going from state to state and trying to just screen it for as many people as possible. And the whole tour that she was on was kind of built around this question of like, is this film still relevant? Does this still feel relevant today? And she really wanted to make a stop in Tucson, but she wanted to make a stop in Arizona in general. And there really was so few places that had 35 millimeter screening technology to be able to still do that, you know. The Loft, of course, being one, but you know, they were renovating at the time, so like, it was just kind of like, how can we make this work? And so I just emailed her because I just thought, well, let's see if we can make something happen. And she actually got back to me and was very eager to like be like, if you can find a venue, I'll play a digital version and we can just make this thing happen. So it was a very kind of a chaotic month of trying to pull it all together, but we ended up hosting it at Splinter Collective here in Tucson. And it was an outdoor screening. We ended up procuring our own high definition big screen projector and everything. And yeah, it ended up being a really great event. There was like probably 80 people who showed up. Most of them had never seen the film before. We were so lucky to be able to work with the Southern Arizona Film Society and the Tucson MoCA. So like there were just so many great elements that came together, and Shuli came and they were actually filming a documentary about the road trip, more or less, with two other filmmakers who were around. And yeah, it was just such a sweet time. They all really enjoyed their time here, and they were saying that this was just such like an oasis in the desert. And it seemed like they had a really wonderful time and they wanted to come back. Yeah. The Q&A was wonderful too. It was a lot of people who connected with the politics of the film. So I think whether or not the film is still relevant, I think that question got answered in Tucson.
All right, so we are going to move on. So next we're going to talk about Black Scorpion.
When Darcy's father is brutally murdered, her search for justice drives her outside the law.
Why did you do it?
You assaulted the district attorney.
He killed my father.
I'm gonna need your badge and your gun.
I'm a good cop.
You were a good cop.
Transformed by a childhood memory.
Mind if I drop in?
She was all dressed in black.
Where did she come from?
She had this long braid, like a tail, like a scorpion.
She swears to fight crime.
Mass Marauder saved Mayor.
Feel the sting of the Black Scorpion.
It's in my nature.
For my selection this time around, we're going to take you back in time. Back before the age of the superhero movie, there was a gray area. Sort of at this point, superhero movies were really a hard sell, despite the comic industry itself being in a giant boom at that point. This was sort of in the beginning of the death of Superman and the reboot of the X-Men and the sort of age of the 19 million covers for X-Men issue 1. And So when you did have comic book movies then, it was either Batman. It was either the Batman with Keaton, or just sort of some hit and misses like Disney. Wasn't it Disney that did The Rocketeer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Stranger, The Phantom. Like there was like a hollow thing where they tried to bring out these older characters and they tried to give them that 90s edge. But
Dick Tracy too.
Yeah, Dick Tracy.
Yep.
Another great example. Looked great. It was like an old car up on wheels. Looked pretty, but it went nowhere. The thing about that period of time was it felt like comic books. They had an edge. They're primary colored. They were passé. It just wasn't a thing then. And so along that vein, when they were finally sort of getting an understanding of what they wanted their characters to be like, you started seeing, obviously, female superheroes, female characters coming out of the mix. You had Buffy, you had Zenith, you had stuff like that. And they were all ladies with an edge and that were a bit more realistic than what I would say the Wonder Woman I grew up. The 70s Wonder Woman as opposed to a Buffy, it's a different feel, a different tone. So Roger Corman decided that he was going to throw his hat into the ring in 1995 and come up with his own female superhero. Her name was Black Scorpion. This was presented as part of Roger Corman Presents that was on Showtimes in the mid-90s, and they did quite a few really interesting things on there. Also, keep in mind, this was not long after his much maligned Fantastic Four movie.
Okay.
Yeah. So he still had sort of that superhero thing in the veins going. The characters wore leather. Everything was in shade of dark. It was all about how extreme and how edgy, yet how much TNA can they possibly throw into one superhero. In a lot of ways, it's a parody. And in a lot of ways, it's so dead serious with itself that you take it serious sort of by association.
Yeah.
It forces you to say, this is what it is. You're sitting here, so it is what it is. What I loved about this was what they were able to do visually, especially considering when this was made. I mean, if you look at a lot of the CGI effects now, as opposed to then, they're very glaringly, you could tell that they're very much a thing at that time. But lucky for us, the king of exploitation and the king of budget-friendly movies decided to jump on this bandwagon. And like I said, Black Scorpion was born. Set in Angel City, Darcy Walker is a detective by day, vigilante by night. Softcore Vixen Jones Severance plays the titular role, and she also played the role in the following sequel movie. And I believe the second one was called Aftershock. A side note of someone that I love in this movie, Garrett Morris, is in it. She plays the tech wizard who gives her weapons and updates her vehicle and everything. And
gives the stuff.
Yeah, it's Garrett Morris. It's Garrett Morris. And there's also another sort of an aside in the beginning where she's doing the undercover work with the other lady of the evening. That character actually becomes a very prominent and side character when this show some years later went on to the Sci-Fi Channel to become an actual series. So they kept this universe, even from this sort of beginnings, when they did bring it to a series, they were really faithful to the universe. Like Roger Corman was really dedicated to like this. It wasn't just a one shot and over kind of a deal. There was a lot of thought and a lot of love put in this character. There's a lot of really cool things where in the beginning, the daughter is recounting a story that her dad told about the story of the frog and the scorpion, about how the scorpion gets the frog to give it a ride across the river, but then the scorpion stings the frog and says, well, it's in my nature. And that's sort of a tagline that sort of comes back later in to sort of tie the character in with the narrative of, well, my father was this, and I'm sort of stepping in his footsteps, but in my stiletto thigh-high boots, my push-up bra. Yeah. Because, you have to. And a thong.
Yes.
She's doing high kicks in a thong.
Yeah.
I mean, a thong. But, hey, I think one of the best parts in this was where they do a non-derivative transformation scene where she creates her costume from her hooker costume. Very a la Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah. Very, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All it's missing is, I don't know about you, Miss Kitty. That's all that was missing from that moment. What I liked about this is this sort of came along when in comic books, the bad girl trope was really becoming a thing. You had Barbarella coming back into comic book consciousness. You had Vampirella. You had Lady Rawhide. You had Ghost. You had Glory. You had all of these female characters that were sort of coming in and were sort of a superhero reinterpretation of the Vargas girls. And it was amazing. You had sort of this channeling of like the Betty Page of those ladies where it's titillating, but yet they're good guys and they're in charge. And it just was something that just added something to that genre. And I feel that even though people might look at this as very dated and there might be some very sexual, sexist overtones to it, there's something about it that is just so stamped of the time it was made that I feel that in many ways what we would sort of see as sort of a backwards way of looking at things, I feel also is a really good way of reminding us of how we used to view things, especially in hyper-textualized versions of humans, especially in the superhero world.
Well,
and like I said, this spawned a series that was quite popular. And what I loved about this was they did an interview with Roger Corman, and he said that when he was casting, he said that his only notes to the casting crew was, give me my Linda Carter, which I found a very cool shout out, that she was like the visual.
Yeah.
Like that's the mold that I want this character to fit.
Yeah.
So,
I think I had fun watching it because it was very, very silly.
As much as maybe it's TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was like, so just the woman who did play Black Scorpion only did it for the second movie, but by the series they recast.
Yes, Michelle Lentil.
Yes, they recast.
Yes, yeah. They actually recast it as the lady that they actually cast was an actual martial artist. I believe she actually had some training in martial arts. Yeah. But yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no idea. Yeah, I know.
And it was Garrett Moore didn't reprise his role either. A different character took over.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, I'm done. But also by Corman, the writer who did Fantastic Four, also wrote Black Scorpion.
Yes.
So we had the same writer do both. So yeah. So he was definitely looking to have this thing kind of blow up, I guess, as Roger Corman wanted it to blow up.
Well, I feel like it was one of those things where he was like, let's grab this hunk of superhero mud, fling it at the wall.
Oh yeah.
Now, without any of that context, I just was like really taken by the aesthetic of the whole thing. Like it has a very like bright style to the whole thing, to the point where it almost at times I was wondering like who is the target demographic for this, because it, like you were saying, it has so many bright colors, and I kind of think any superhero thing, especially in the 90s, couldn't really escape association with some kind of childlike vibe to it. That's kind of what was so interesting about it, veering into prostitution and like this very strange combination of aesthetic choices and narrative.
Well, I mean, you were reading comic books then, and I mean, look up. There's an amazing artist who did, in my opinion, one of the best runs on Wonder Woman, but it was during the 90s when their torsos were like this and their waists were literally this, if they were a real person. Like, but his name is Mike Deodato. All of his female characters had dangerously life-threatening thongs. Like this wasn't a French cut. This was you're an Antarctica cut.
Yeah.
Like it's just a wish and a hope that that's not going to go somewhere it shouldn't. And these people out there doing like backflips and kicks in this.
Oh, it does. Yeah. The wardrobe is really fantastic throughout the whole film.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and when you realize that the only thing that was actually truly thought out and really actual money put in was her costumes. Like, if you watch the show, a lot of the costumes on the TV show, you can tell they went into props and said, what can we build? You can tell.
Yeah.
Oh, you could tell.
I found some trivia about this movie, and talking about costumes, it says that she kept her costume. She still has it to this day.
Wouldn't surprise me.
So yeah, she was like, I want to keep it. She kept it from the first movie.
I mean, if I were an actor, and I was able to do a costume, a character like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, that's sort of a commonality with a lot of actors. Like, a lot of the actors that I've always looked up to, like, there's multiples of them who are like, if they don't straight out have a costume, they have pieces. Like the guys from Supernatural each got a car.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, crazy. Well, this director, so he did a lot of other direct-to-video action movies. Like, so you could tell he's kind of been in this vein for a little bit. He did a movie called Blood Fist 7, Carnosaur 3, and he recently directed a movie called Christmas Ice Catastrophe. So yeah, he's very much, it seems like this filmmaker is very much on the B-movie, sort of having fun making movies sort of edge.
He's that third movie sounds like he could be a Netflix Christmas disaster movie.
Oh yeah.
The new B-movie, as it were.
So yeah, but he also produced a movie called Hard to Die. He produced a movie called The Rain Killer and Sorority House Massacre 2. So yeah. I have to note that these movies sound pretty cool.
Did it tell everything that the first sorority massacre party couldn't tell?
There's probably more of the story, right? To probably, this sorority has to go down.
No, I mean, Robert, Davies' sleepover. Sleepover Massacre. There was 2 of those.
Oh yeah. There's
2 of those.
I mean, there's Sleepaway Camp. I mean, there's there's so many. Yeah, there's so many. It's just like
we could do a whole episode just about Sleepaway.
We could. Totally could. Okay, honest, I'd never heard of this movie before until you recommended it. And so watching it, I was like, what am I in for? And I was just, it's bad, but it's so good.
Well,
and that's the thing. And I was like, this is, I can't stop watching.
Well, what's crazy is this movie was advertised in comic book shops.
Oh, really?
General audience comic book shops. Now, granted, there was a screener copy that I remember at the shop I worked at that cut out literally the adult bits. So the part where Darcy and the detective hook up, I was just like a cutaway. That happened. Because I'm sorry, could you imagine it's Saturday, it's 2 p.m., you take little Jimmy and little Susie in to go get their newest funny book, and they greeted in a thing with John Severance straddling a dude.
Yeah.
Not exactly. But there it was. I just remember looking at my friend when he put up this stand-up for it, because I remember there's a life-size stand-up in our comic shop.
Yeah.
Did you save the cardboard cutout?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I would have given anything. I would have given anything, because I bet you money those were only a handful made.
Yeah, there's plenty of
you.
I mean, they were pushing it a little bit, it seemed. They were actually kind of, they were marketing it.
They were trying to hop on the Xena wagon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you had Xena, you had Charmed, you had Buffy, you had Dark Angel.
Yeah, true.
Hell, for that matter, you even had VIP. Like, you had so many. There was like in this 90s, it seemed like the 70s popped back up again on TV.
Yeah.
Where suddenly it was female-driven action.
Or it's Charlie's Angels again, So,
the movies, Charlie's Angels movies.
Yeah,
those were hugely successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't heard about this movie either until watching it. And like I said, the aesthetic alone was something that I was just it was like a very visually arresting movie to be able to watch. And it had kind of all the best kind of B-movie aesthetics for something that I would imagine watching in a little 4x3 screen. That that kind of made for TV movie vibe. It was
Little 13 black and white or little 13-inch color TV in your bedroom.
Yeah. Run off a VHS. That's a VHS. There should be a VHS.
Or like some of it's on beta.
Yes. I mean, beta was out by like 86, 85, I think. So, yeah.
But I still had a beta machine that I still reporting stuff on.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, please, that thing worked. I paid $90 for that. I wasn't getting rid of that.
No, not at all. Plus, they were smaller, and I heard they were better picture, the VHS. So they're
well, I also worked in an industry where they were like, we got Super VHS. It's slightly better. Yeah, it's VHS. Exactly. It's VHS. You're still degrading it every time that thing runs over the heads. Let's be honest.
Yep. All right, as to move things on, I'm going to go to my pick, Steven Soderbergh's Kafka.
Kafka. Is that your real name? Why shouldn't it be?
There are people watching.
I understand you fancy yourself as a writer. You should find a more athletic hobby.
To solve a mystery, he will enter a nightmare. Kafka, directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Came out in 91, starring Jeremy Irons. It was Soderbergh's second feature after Sex, Lies, and Videotape. A lot of people say it's his third because for some reason people count the live feature of Yes Live as a feature film, but he directed that. But I Super Sex, Lies, and Videotape is actually like first like
great movie.
So I would say it's the second one. But yeah, Jeremy Irons plays Kafka, and so I have always been a huge fan of Kafka ever since I was like high school, younger, junior high, et cetera. And so when this movie came out, I was like, or actually, 91, I didn't know it came out to like probably, I found out it probably was around like 97, 98 is when I found out it exists. Cause I didn't really see it around too much. And then after that, I liked it. I thought it was really well done. I thought the way they used a lot of the black and white to color to black and white. I'm a huge fan of film noir, and this thing just screams those shadows of film noir, and I like that. I like where it was taking place, where it was shot. It's just, it's to me, it's Kafka all the way. And I think Jeremy Irons does a great thing of Kafka. One thing I do have to note, though, is that Steven Soderbergh decided to get really high recently. Recently meaning like, I don't know, 5 years, and re-edited the film.
Oh, dear.
And it's now called Mr. F. It removes all mentions of Kafka. And basically, the dialogue has been completely removed. And the film is shorter. Soderbergh edited under the influence of a bag of weed and put like jazz music B-sides to it. And so it's not like he hates Kafka. He just felt he wanted to do something different with it. And he wants people to watch both versions of it, from what I read. But he just wants people to watch Mr. Neff first, then watch Kafka second. That's all he asks of people. So he's not like he hates Kafka, he's throwing it away.
When the edibles hit.
Yeah, he's like...
Jeez.
Yeah.
I get it, because I've got like actual digital proof that I've been baked and planned a show before.
Yeah.
And been back there and go, oh God. Oh dear. So yeah, I get it.
It's just basically, I guess maybe, I don't know if he did it during COVID. He's just like, I'm completely bored. Let me read at one of my movies. I don't know what happened, but it showed at a couple film festivals. It's still not out. It showed recently last year at a film festival. I don't know which one, but it just recently showed again, Mr. Neff. I do want to check it out. I'm a huge fan of the original.
I feel like it would be missing something.
Yeah, I feel like too. But I don't know. He does,
I agree with you.
He does good movies too, though. So it's like, you kind of want to check it out,
So that's true. Because Sex, Lies, and Videotapes.
Yeah.
Maybe. No, great movie. Yeah. I agree with you about the film noir. I didn't think about that till you mentioned it. And then it's so funny because I mentioned it before. As one of my favorite actresses, Teresa Russell.
Mm-hmm.
Love her. She's got that cool, smoky voice, and there's just that delivery that's just her.
Yes. She is so good at this.
Oh yeah,
She's great in this.
oh yeah. Well, and her sort of, I don't know, maybe it's the almost Lauren Bacall-esque voice. Maybe it's she has features that seem from a different time. It really just, it was just a perfect casting for someone like that. You know, and Jeremy Irons, what is Jeremy Irons? Like
He's
literally you just have to say it's Jeremy Irons and just point.
Yeah, he's good in everything.
Yeah.
He's even good as the bad guy in Die Hard 3. I mean, he's good in everything.
I would have to say it's the one, the psycho killer, the laughing one. I call him the hyena.
Yeah.
That was one of the most interesting choices for that actor because he was unhinged. It was almost as if Jack Nicholson's Joker was on meth.
I agree.
Kind of insane, but it was cool. Like when he traps him in the elevator shaft. Yeah. That's one of those literally when you're screaming at the screen, run.
Yeah.
Run.
That was kind of almost like horrifying because there's just certain scenes he's just running from this madman who's just like,
when you're like, and the dude,
can you get away any faster? It's just like, yeah, it's crazy.
When you see him, well, you don't see him, but you know he systematically took down the two people in the one scene. We drags the guy off the wall.
Yep.
You're like, I'm kind of glad we actually didn't see this because I feel like this might have turned into an Italian horror film if we did see what he did to these people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it's like it has those noir aspects to it, and you can really feel like as I was watching it, I really felt like, I guess it's just how Kafka is, but it's like the oppressive quality of like the Industrial Revolution, right? And the kind of just the towering environment that these characters are kind of underneath. And then just seeing that kind of veer into horror, it can do so seamlessly, and then just bounce back out and become like, oh, now we're just back in bureaucracy. And
you're trying to add comedy in it with the two characters who are just like bumbling buffoons. They're like,
oh God, the one scene that I literally would love to do as a meme says, "Tell me you work retail without telling me you work retail."
Yeah.
When he walks up to them and he goes, and I know I'm paraphrasing, but he basically asks them, "How is it to work here?" And the one says, "It's hell." And then the one, "Is it hell?" And the one goes, "Yeah." And then the other one's like, "No." And he was like, "Oh yeah, no." Like, but what I loved was the one who was like, just on him like, "Oh yeah, it's hell. Oh yeah, it's hell." And it just, I love it. I love in little bits of movies like that when you have those moments that you can relate to like that.
I feel like one interesting quality that kind of tied all three of the movies together was like they're each dealing with characters who are trying to navigate a broken society on some level.
It's kind of like, well, this is what we're left with. These are our options. These are the things we have to do if we need to make things tolerable again for us. You know? And the sad thing is it's kind of what we're dealing with now.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of those qualities that makes the 90s a very fascinating period for cinema, because it's like a lot of filmmakers feel like they were responding to so much at the end of the 20th century. And now we're at the beginning of the 21st and kind of like you said, having to kind of deal with it.
Yeah, we didn't really do a whole lot better.
Yeah.
We might have, if anything, we might have gone backwards. Like I think in Germany, it's 6 p.m. And then meanwhile in the United States it's 1958.
Yeah.
Yeah, the three films each tackle that in such a different, interesting way with their own sense of comedy too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always think it's literally man is always trying to figure out, people always trying to figure out exactly what life is and what we're doing. And are we doing the right thing? Are we, why? And then we don't want to be oppressed, but then some people want to. And it's just like, it's this thing where it's just, we have to constantly fight, for what we want and what we believe in. And
like the amazing goddess Annie Lennox said in the 80s, some of them want to be abused.
Yeah.
Some of us want to abuse you.
Yeah.
on what lens you're looking through, what it is that you feel in your moment you need to make your life feel the way your corner of your life needs to feel.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I think what's good about these movies is they're 30 plus years old and they can still have messages and they can still have moments that even to this day that people can sort of go back and pull something that sort of applies to whatever they're going through, even if it's just escapism. Like my movies purely, and you know, most of my movies are escapism.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like if you found a movie of mine that had a meaning, it's like, well, surprise. Cause I'd like to think I'm a deep thinker, but I'm not.
But you know, I mean, as far as going back to this movie just for a second, as far as it goes, like there were a few things in here that, you know, we're talking like the castle represents the Kafka's book. The castle represents a few things in here. There's a moment where he tells his friend to burn all his writings. He actually did that in real life to his friend, and his friend did not. Thank God, because if they did, then we would not have any Kafka's writings available as far as that goes. So yeah, so he did the same thing in this movie that he did in real life, and in both instances, the guy, and by the end, he was slowly dying. Because yes, so that's eventually what killed Kafka. So by the end of this film, you know, he didn't really have long to live anyways. So yeah, he survived this thing, but he was like, yeah. So a lot of it kind of mirrored his own life in some ways. So yeah. So yeah.
Sort of his, and I honestly feel like he didn't really change his mindset of, again, paraphrasing, where I'm a writer, but I don't necessarily care if I have an audience because I'm writing for me, not for you. And it's one of those things where I was like, I've kind of had that conversation when I've been in dressing rooms across the U.S. where you'd have that one queen who wants to give you their little bit of info or their little bit of feedback. And I'm basically like, well, this is my art. That's your art.
Yes. Yes, very true. Very true. Yeah. And I think on that note, we're closing out on this episode. Anything final you want to say, Jazzy?
Yeah, if anybody's interested in checking out my work, you can find it at jazzyboho.com. Or you can follow me on different social medias, same name, Jazzy Boho. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you for being part of it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Cool.
Now commencing our ascent back to the surface. If you want more content, visit brink.com. If you want less content, you are happy and well adjusted. Congratulations. Your hosts were David Pike and Veronica Chase. All art by Andrea Osoynik. Theme song by Josh Bill Humor. If you are angry, DM death threats at Brink Media on Instagram. If you are horny, also DM us. Thank you for your attention. You are free to go.